Here.
Here.
Okay, on the agenda today, it's a quick agenda. We're talking about the food service overdue balance account, looking at making a policy in terms of collections and management of overdue balances. In addition, a quick overview of our first report for the first quarter, or first beginning of the first quarter. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Lang to begin discussing the food service budget, food service recoveries. Thank you.
When we started talking at the meeting on August 23rd, it was a long night, and one of the issues we were talking about was the food service, the collections policy, when kids go through the line and then end up not having cash or don't qualify for free or reduced lunch, what the current policy or process is. So this is a memo that I prepared back in March that I thought we could just kind of walk through. That gives you an idea of exactly now what's happening, with a couple of other suggestions for improvement going forward. But one of the first things that we actually have is, if you recall, at the beginning of last year, there was a lag in notifying some parents that their students had accrued a balance in the food service account. We had purchased a new point-of-sale system, or POS system, to track all of the free and reduced lunch and paid lunch sales for breakfast and lunch in the schools. And it was fully implemented last fall, along with a way to do online applications for free and reduced lunch, as well as paper applications, which end up getting scanned, which accelerate the approval process. And of course, you can still do the paper application if you don't have internet access. So that all went into place last fall, and basically what we were then dealing with is we had very good data on who was going through buying breakfast and lunch, and if they didn't happen to qualify for free reduced lunch, the process in years past had been each individual school on a weekly or bi-weekly basis would send some kind of a note home to the child's parents indicating that they had a balance, requesting that they pay the bill. Having the POS system allowed us to really centralize that and to take that kind of clerical burden off the schools and to operate that out of central office with the Family Resource Center and the Food Service Department, because we had the data there. So what ended up getting agreed to was that on a weekly basis, any student in the system that had a balance, well, first of all, as far as food goes, our policy and practice has been we do not deny any student either free breakfast or lunch when they come through the register if they don't have cash with them at the point of sale. So no child is denied a breakfast or lunch. If they're free or reduced, obviously it's credited properly to their account. If they're a paid student and they don't have cash on them, then a balance accrues to their account. And what we came down to was that basically on a weekly basis, a letter would go home to parents. It would be processed out of central office for anyone that had a balance of $15 or greater. So once you hit the $15 plateau, you were getting a weekly letter. The letters would be printed on Thursday, put in mailboxes on Friday because we didn't want to have the postage associated. So Friday they go home with the child in the backpack saying you had a balance. So at least parents were now being notified on a weekly basis of any lunch bills that they had accrued. That was, relatively successful. It worked okay. It's just the sheer amount of letters that we're having to put out on a daily basis for students that had accrued balances is just very difficult. Now, it's not in place yet, but one of the enhancements we are looking at the system, because we do own or we subscribe to ConnectEd, the Blackboard system, so that we can do phone messages home from schools or parents. We're trying to see if there's a way to actually upload the file into the system and have the system push out automated phone calls home instead of the weekly letter. If we can actually get to the point where that's possible, we could look at whatever the minimum balance is, because obviously there'd be no paperwork burden to set maybe a phone call at anyone that's over $10, which would be a week's of lunches. Perhaps we want to still have the letter go out for anyone maybe over 15, 20, 25, whatever we decide. That could be a follow-up to the phone calls. But for the time being, we're going to just still have the paper letter that's going to go out weekly for anyone over 15. But I'm hoping by early October, we'll know if that Blackboard Connect message is going to work, so that we could do that in lieu of some of the weekly letters, just to cut down on the paperwork involved. Basically then, we looked around to see what other school districts were doing as far as if they had policies with students who weren't able to pay. And I had provided a few examples for the committee to consider. But I think basically one of the things has to come down to is our policy now to not refuse service to any student when they come through the line. I think the committee needs to figure out if that it does want to be their policy. And if that's the policy, you don't want to deny anyone, then we get more into just how we're going to notify folks of the accruals and then try to collect the funds. Some school systems, as I indicate in some of these bullets, they just, they don't allow students to accrue a balance. So if you're a cash student and you don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, you can't buy a school lunch, therefore no balance accrues. Some school systems set a cap. So you can accrue a balance, say up to $50, but after the $50, if you're a paid student, you're not able to purchase a lunch until you bring the balance down below 50. There were districts, and this was more anecdotal in discussions with them, there are some districts that say at the elementary school level, regardless of the balance, we're going to provide a meal to the child, and we're never going to turn them away. But at the middle of the high school level, they might have a balance of, say, 50 or whatever the dollars are, because the students are a little older and supposedly have more control over being able to pay or not pay. And then the last issue that had come up last year too was the issue of if some parents absolutely insisted that they didn't want their child to accrue a balance, could you have an opt-out policy? And yes, the computer will allow that, but the downside to that, which the committee needs to decide one way or the other, is if you opt out and the student goes through the line and they don't have money on them, then what do you do? Are you literally going to take the meal away from the child and not serve them and accrue a balance? That's kind of a discussion we have to have, because it's one thing to say you're going to do that or that's the policy, but it's very difficult. That puts the cafeteria staff in a compromising position when the child's already picked up the lunch and they come to the register, and then you're going to say, no, you can't have that because your parents have opted out. Then you have a student that goes unfed for that lunch period. So to me, that's a little harsh, but it is certainly a possibility for consideration. The other thing that did come up that we were talking about when we were looking at some of the balances over the course of the year, and there would be certain students that, say in October, would have a balance of $18, and that same student would have a balance of $18 in November and January and March. The balance would never change. So we kind of looked at that, and the reason for that was they were students that potentially came to the district who upon entry didn't qualify for free or reduced lunch because they hadn't been in the district before. So technically they're in a paid status, and the gap in time while their application is being processed, so they fill out an application because they qualify for free lunch. It may take a week to a week and a half for the application to actually process and come back approved. That person has accrued a balance, which then obviously if the child qualifies for free lunch, it's very difficult for the parent to pay off. So one of the, that's why they would be kind of locked in, because then they triggered into a free status, but they still maintain that balance. So one thing for the committee to really consider, which would clean up a bunch of those charges, would be to say waive any of the accrued fees over a particular period of time if you wanted, if the student applied and then was eligible for free lunch. That could be something you could entertain, because those balances are just going to carry forward basically throughout the whole year and then from year to year, because the child just doesn't have the financial means to pay for that. So I think that would be a step that I would support and consider recommending to you, would be to waive any accrued balance for a particular period of time for a student that does end up being free. But I kind of open it to discussion, and would just like to get some feedback to really kind of finalize this. But we're basically starting the school year with the same practice and policy that was in effect last year, and can tweak it or modify it from there.
Does the administration have any recommendations that they want to make changes to the current policy? Is there something that, besides the waiver of the folks that roll into the free and reduced lunch, are there other changes, or would you want to keep the policy as is? More specifically, is the administration's recommendation we keep the policy as is with the one change of, children who go into the free and reduced lunch program, their balance would be basically waived? Are there any other changes, or do we, I don't know, through the superintendent or through Mr. Lang?
Yeah, I don't have any additional ones. I mean, philosophically, I'm of the opinion that you don't withhold food from a child, whether they can afford it or can't afford it. The children that come through the line for breakfast or lunch, they're not the reason that they don't have money with them. And I just think it puts, again, the school and the child in harm to take a lunch away from them because their parent either didn't have the means or didn't provide them with lunch that day. I personally would rather see the child eat and accrue a balance and try to work with the family for payment afterward, as opposed to not allowing that child to eat going through the line. I do think, financially too, when a child does qualify for free lunch, and it's just the lag in the application processing, which we're actually doing, now you've got 3 ways to do it. You can go online, which is basically immediate, and it goes into our system the next day if you qualify for free lunch. Some parents don't have access to a computer, so they fill out the paper form, which has to be scanned and verified. There is a little gap in a window where they actually physically have submitted the application. However, it hasn't been approved yet. I personally think from the point where they file the application and it's approved would be a reasonable window to, if it does come up that they're in free status, to go back and to allow that accrued balance to be negated. I think that's fair. And I think the point of application submission to the point of approval is a good window. I wouldn't want to see it opened up to a student who accrues a balance for 4 or 5 months through the fall, and then all of a sudden fills out an application in January for a meal, and then have to go back to September and credit that balance just because they didn't comply or fill out the form. I think the point of application to approval is a reasonable amount of time or a reasonable window that we can control to wipe out that balance, because the family really doesn't have the means to pay. That would be my recommendation for a change for this year. And then again, I hope by October I can come back and report to you about the phone call connect, because I think that would be nice in addition to the paper. Okay. And perhaps we can tweak the paper responses and increase the dollar amount where the paper is going out, just to make it a little bit more manageable. Because the phone calls, we can just set how many times we want to go out, and there's no effort involved really on our side. It's just going to be a computer script that's going to send out the messages.
Okay, Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Larry. I do think the Connect Ed call will be a promising way to reach out to parents. The only portion that I'd like to see maybe us have a little dialogue on is the balance limit, that we reach out to families to find out why, someone needs to make a call out from the school, whether it's the principal, the parent liaison, and I do think it's fair, maybe at $50 for a phone call home to see if we can get them to fill out the free and reduced lunch application. I don't think lunch ladies should be taking food out of children's hands, so I'm not in favor of putting a limit on it. But I also think that we should put a time frame, like you said, on the uncollectible funds write-off, that we can't be doing it in June for, September. And that would be all that I could recommend. Thank you.
I know, Ms. Rustikowicz?
Thank you, Mr. Larry. I had a couple of questions. So how much in meal fees was outstanding at the end of the year, at the end of the school year last year? Number 2, were those outstanding balances reconciled over the summer? And number 3, what type of deficit did we see in the food service portion of the district last year?
Okay. Mr. Lang, if you could.
Do you want to address I know what Karen sent me for the current balance in August, but I don't know what it was at the end of June.
Okay.
There you go.
At the end of the school year, we were close to $100,000 in negative balances. I have it broken out by school, and we have also found that there's a direct correlation between missing applications and negative balances. So I had already talked to Jean about actually working with the principals and assistant principals and encouraging them, helping us get the applications filled out. And we have until October 10th is the cutoff day for the 30 days where you carry over your eligibility status from the previous year. On October 10th is when we trigger, where we'll be contacting people that you were free last year, you didn't fill out an application, and now you're going to start to collect a balance. And then we could set a parameter around that about you have 2 weeks to fill out an application. My concern would just be, what would we do if they don't fill out an application at that point? So right now, we're in a situation where we don't have any consequences surrounding sending the letters for negative balances. And we're not allowed to force anybody to fill out a free and reduced mail application as well.
How much did you collect out of the 100,000, I think was your second question? How
Well,
much were you able to?
when we first started the process, we were doing really well. We were probably collecting $2,000 to $3,000 a week. So we're sending out 1,200 letters a week on average and collecting probably 2 to 3. What happened was at the end of the school year, it snowballed. And nobody was paying, and even people that were been paying up until probably May stopped paying altogether. So we saw we were probably running around 60, 68, 70K, and then every week it would creep, and towards the end we were close to 100,000. And we were still sending the letters out, and we also met with the cook leads, and the cook leads were sending home envelopes with the student's name on it, and this is how much your child owes. But I think people just knew at the end of the school year that they just weren't, there was no incentive for them to continue to pay.
Just to follow up with your question, just
To follow up on
well, the
that.
follow-up question is, you had 100,000, how much, I mean, there's a lot of questions after that, but I think Ms. Ross-Sickwood's second question was, how much did you collect?
The latest report that I saw, dating back to sometime in around August 10th or so, was about $80,000 still outstanding. So probably about $20,000 was collected since the end of the school year until the August date. What we're working through now is kind of breaking down not only school by school, kind of what's still outstanding, because those balances are going to just start now for the start of the school year. And I'd like to really kind of isolate out what the past charges were from current year charges, just so that the family, when they start to see bills coming in, can reconcile to themselves what was really last year and then what's new for this year. But in addition to that, going school by school, I also do want to break out how many of those could have been application related. So we're in the process of doing that right now. But it went from about 100 to 80, so we took in about 20,000, I would say, ballpark over the summer. So the outstanding balance today would stand at about 80. I forget the third question, though.
I think we're in the black in the overall numbers, but this is kind of a separate, so we can
Right.
get into like the regular meeting. I mean, what was the number we're in the profit?
406,000.
406,000. So in addition to being $80,000 in this area under, we're still 406,000 in the black. This is obviously a pretty big, 80,000 is huge. As soon as we can reconcile how many are free and reduced and see what the real number is in terms, we could probably put, well, we're going to need to put consequences in, obviously. I mean, I don't know, Ms. Rosick, if you have any further comments or questions or.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Just two thoughts. One is, if it's possible for those families that have outstanding balances from the previous year, to actually send them a bill home from central administration that says, this is what you owe for the school year. That type of mechanism of notification. And also in there, if this committee chooses to put in place a cap of sorts, informing these parents that once they reach a current balance for this current year of, say, $50, whatever we decide upon, their child's capacity to have a meal at school is going to be compromised. Just a thought.
Ms. Situate, you had asked a question about the food service balance. I can give you that report at our next meeting. We've got 2 outstanding charges that still have to hit the account for last year. We're reconciling the health insurance cost that should be allocated to the food service folks. And then the other issue that I have to encumber funds for is the contract that went into effect for January 1 to June 30th. Is still kind of tied up in labor relations, so it hasn't been released yet. So we owe retroactive wages that will hit that account. That'll affect the fund balance on June 30th. And I'm hoping that that's going to get resolved before the end of September. So probably at the end of the first quarter report, when I do that for you, for the end of September, I'll have the fund balance. the true fund balance going in. What we're trying to do is actually get to a fund balance of about 3 months of operating, which would be close to $1.8 million. That's what we would like to have as a fund balance at the end of the year to provide us with sufficient funds going forward. If I had to guess right now, and I hate to guess, but I'm going to guess we're somewhere in the $1.2 million to $1.4 million range. We're not at the $1.8 million that I'd like to be at. But like I said, I'll report out fully at the end of the first quarter.
Go ahead, Ms. Go ahead. Any follow-ups?
Thank you. I just have one follow-up thought. Having my own children having started school this week with every other child in the district, I noticed that we received multiple notifications for SNAP sign-up, for free and reduced lunch sign-up, but we received no information with regard to My Nurture Kids. While that information is contained in the handbooks, that's great, but it's, if you want to, we have to do just as much outreach for those families that are paying a full rate for their child's meals as we do for our SNAPs and our free and reduced lunch families.
Ms. Scott?
My comment was related to that. Some of the feedback we received from parents last year was that they didn't know that they were going to accrue balances. And, this wasn't food that, it wasn't a matter of free lunch applications. It was a matter of they wanted pizza and chicken nuggets and threw their lunch in the trash. And they just didn't know that their kids could even accrue a balance. And I didn't know if there was any way to send out a notice or a letter to the parents just to let them know that we talked about this last year a little bit, I think. And the other thing is, has a notice already been sent over with the carryover balance from last year?
We have
Notice?
not, we haven't sent out any new balance letters. Jay and I had talked about maybe the letter should be coming from somebody in administration versus somebody from food service. That may have more of an impact. It's really just a setup in our system of being able to determine what the fields are, and we can print those letters out, but we haven't sent those out yet.
Well, what time frame, Mr. Lane, do you anticipate making a decision who would send it out? I mean, I think if it came from the superintendent or at that level, I think that would be nice, or the principal level at the particular school, if that's the more direct contact for folks. It's sooner the better, so folks can understand what we're trying to achieve. And the other part of it, Part B of it, which is still, we need to get the website up to date, and this is really the first area where I think we need that update so people can get that information. But so I guess the first question is, what time frame do you believe we'll be getting these letters out, and under who would the letter go out?
A letter like clarifying balance at the end of last
Correct,
year.
yeah.
I have the student list. I'm just trying to disaggregate out who potentially would qualify under that free reduced lunch application thing. Now, we could just mail merge it to everyone. I mean, tomorrow if we really wanted to, just to get the letter out. That's not the holdup. I was just curious to see, again, how many of these kids technically are free over the course of the year, just so we're not inundating them with more letters. But if it's the group's desire, I have no problem before the end of the week actually getting those letters out, and they could come from Central.
Yeah, if we could get them out, I don't know if the principal would be better or the central. I mean, whatever's more effective. I mean, sometimes a lot of folks don't think of central as, the school. They think of the principal as the school. And I don't want to put undue burden on the principal, but at least you have a direct contact that they may, or at least they see every day. So I'll leave it, I guess we could leave it up to your judgment, but as soon as you get that out, the better.
I do like the idea, Ms. Rosicewicz, with the, say, if we've set like $50 as an additional assistance here, if we worked with, say, anyone at the school level that hit the $50 plateau, to perhaps ask like a parent liaison or a social worker or someone to reach out to the family and really walk them. There's not that many that go over that amount, but really walk them through the free reduced lunch application process, make sure they're qualifying for all the benefits they can, just to try to help with that. So we could actually kind of incorporate that into the procedures. Again, I have no problem with the letter going out before the end of the week. The other matter that Ms. Rosicewicz raised was going forward this year, say if you hit a $50 plateau for charges, is that something the committee wants to consider, not allowing students after they hit that plateau to purchase lunch? I don't know what direction you want me to go in on that, just so I could pull more data together, or start to craft a policy for your review.
Okay, I guess Ms. Superintendent and then Ms. Rosicewicz.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Just something that comes into mind. in some cases where there is a long period of time where a child's not paying, I mean, we should get a social worker involved. I'm not, it's, when you think about that quantity of money, it's a lot of kids, obviously. But if there is kind of a rationale for not paying, not staying up, in some cases, if it's happening over time, you kind of think about neglect. And, if the kid's not getting paid here, is a kid eating? I mean, these are all connected. So whether it be first step, parent liaison, all of the contacts we do. But if we have now, we've been together for a couple of years now. So there are families that over time are perhaps gathering a balance over time. So at this particular point, you're going into your third year, you say, wow, is the kid not eating? Is the kid eating? Is it just because the people don't want to pay? Do they not know? So parent liaison one's piece, but for the really stubborn cases, that we've had over time, I think that maybe that would be where you could get that administration involved and they could kind of do that outreach. I think that would be helpful, especially if it's over 1 year after the next. It's like at the end of the year, we always have over $50 with particular kids. And if that's need, then maybe it's a call a social worker saying, because we do have families, depending on background, that could be concerned about the fact, well, if I apply for this, you're going to contact immigration. That's a constant over time. That could be. So in essence, it's like, no, food never goes to the feds. We never send federal government information about children and food. So when it gets down to that and you have that data, those to me are specific cases where outreach from a social worker would be probably really helpful.
Okay. Ms. Rustikowicz?
This is just my final thought on this, and really just to piggyback on the superintendent's comments. There is that a portion of families that the superintendent points to, but there are also, a portion of families out there with children in the school district who say, have a sudden loss of income in the family and don't realize that they qualify for reader's lunch or free lunch based on their income change. So, I see that in my own line of work every single day, working families that, have never had to access social services ever and never had to access any kind of welfare or assistance benefits. So that's an important piece, and that's why I think, having these types of notifications out to all of our families is the start of a great discussion to pull them in to say, all right, all right, this is where your income level is at. All right, this is what you qualify for or not. So this is great work. I really appreciate all the work you've done on this, and I look forward to our next report.
I think what we need to do now, I think you got some feedback from the folks that are here. What I think we would request is that you put a policy in writing, a recommendation for our next meeting. We're not going to be able to do that tonight, obviously, with some of the feedback that you've had here tonight. I think obviously the social worker piece is essential. The stick mentality or the consequence mentality, obviously I think we're all in agreement. We don't want a child to go without food. Obviously we're all in agreement with that. I think looking at some other areas, maybe we're already doing it in terms of field trips or graduation or something to that end, being a consequence that if you have a balance and it's not something that can be waived for whatever particular reason that's within the policy, your diploma might be withheld, similar to what you do with library books or other types of school equipment. But if you could draft a policy, get it to us so we can kind of go through it at the next meeting.
Sure.
And we can vote on it. At least we can get some school committee teeth behind what our policy actually is going to be.
No, I agree with that. And can I just, as long as we have a few minutes and we're on TV for the viewing audience, could I just ask Sharon to explain that 30-day carryover provision to families?
Yep.
Just so that they really understand that for the start of the school year? Do you
Sure.
mind just talking about that?
Not at all. At the end of every school year, we roll over every child's school eligibility, whether they are free, reduced, or paid, and it rolls over for 30 calendar days. So if you were free at the end of school year last year, you automatically come into the school year free. The challenge for us is that if you're a new student, kindergarten student transferring in, you do not transfer over those benefits from another school district or another state. You come in, and you come in automatically as a paid student. So those are the folks that we're trying to make sure that we're processing those applications. Right now, I have about 5,000 applications that we're in the middle of processing as we speak. But you do have that 30-day window of where if you were free last year, you're free this year, up until that point. Once we get to that point, we'll run a report and see who was free last year and who didn't fill out an application. And we could follow up with those folks and say, you know, maybe you didn't see the application, maybe you missed the application. Would you like to apply for those benefits? And then we can follow up that way and track whether or not their balances start to grow. We don't know if their income eligibility has changed, so we're unaware of that. But we do have that 30-day window of carrying over. So, and it's not 30 days, it's a 30 school day. So for us, the number is October 10th is when we shift into sending letters out and sending out letters of negative balances. We just delivered 5,000 letters on Tuesday morning, identifying kids that have been approved for free, reduced, or paid lunches. So 5,000 kids have already been processed and letters have been sent home with them.
Okay. Any other feedback from the committee members? Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For that information. So I guess what we're going to expect at the next meeting is a recommendation policy that we can discuss and then vote on at the next meeting in September. Ms. Scott?
Did you say, you asked about the $50 cap? That you
Yeah, I
were,
was just curious of your thoughts on it.
my thoughts on it, your thoughts on it?
Go ahead.
I don't agree with the cap. I'd rather just serve all children, so, and same with the field trip. I don't really agree with that either.
I think one of the things that will benefit it greatly is if we're working with the schools and the social workers. We've really worked in a silo up until this point, and I think now that we've opened up the communication and the doors open, that we can start to feel free to contact social workers and principals and give them the list and say, you know, you have 100 children that have a $15 balance. They know the children better than we do. But I think opening that door of communication is going to significantly increase. And I think a lot of it is that we just need folks to fill out the applications. Because if we think about the 3,000 folks that didn't fill out an application, and 74% of our kids are free and reduced, the natural assumption would be is out of those 3,000, 74% of them are free and reduced. And if they're not filling out an application, they're coming through as paid. And we're accruing that balance. So it's really focusing on that.
So why don't we draft the policy as now without the consequences until we can take another look at it at the end of the year to see where we're at. I mean, I think the graduation component, we do that for everything else. If you're not, you know, if you don't turn in your football uniform, just whatever you have, you don't get the diploma. We could do that with lunch balances as well, right? So we could put that into the policy. It won't have much teeth, obviously, K through 4 and what have you. We can track it at the end of the year to see what the problems might be or the successes, and we can adjust the policy if we need to. So I guess, do you have a good, clear understanding as to how you're going to be drafting this?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess at this point, I take a motion for report of progress from Ms. Scott and second by myself. All in favor? Motion to adjourn by Ms. Scott, second by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Sounds
Thank you
good.
very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I know.
Okay. Sorry, I think if we do the outreach and then we still have high lunch balances,